Hello all and welcome to my channel. Single people need some love. Not only being in a relationship, but to have some compassion because what they're going through right now in their current economy is difficult. Single people need to deal with people saying, why are you single? As if there's something wrong, or they associate them being single with being alone. And you get married couples telling single people they're so lucky to be single. And when a single person complains they can't find someone, a married couple would say, what? Well, at least you don't have kids and dealing with all this drama. Trust me, it's better to be on your side. Which, by the way, that is a choice. Having a kid and being married is a choice. It's not miserable. It's the choice that you choose that makes it miserable. The number one thing that makes it so hard being single is they have to deal with this high inflation and the cost of living on their own. In CNBC, they did this video that I'm gonna react to where they discuss exactly that and how difficult it is and if there is any advantages of being single or being married. Before I get there, guys, I really would love it if you hit the like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm really trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and with your help, I will certainly get there. At the end of the video, I'm gonna share with you some statistics, and we're gonna see if it's truly beneficial to live single or be in a relationship. So let's get straight to the video.
Nearly half of all US adults are single today. That number has been steadily rising for several decades. Nearly 70% of men and about 65% of women were married in 1960. Today, it's just over 50% of men and around 50% of women who are married.
They're not single for the usual reasons that you hear. Oh, there's not enough marriageable men for women or any of those kinds of reasons. But instead, that they find single life fulfilling.
Now, for all my single people out there, is it truly because you're happy is the reason why you're single? Or is it because you just can't find the right person? With all these apps out there, you would think finding relationships are easy, but maybe all these options that you're getting is making it harder. So I'm not sure if she's right. You let me know.
As someone single living in a major city like New York, it's definitely very stressful when it comes to personal finances. You have the full burden on your shoulders. So I would say the majority of my friends who are single and live alone, they're very stressed about the cost of living.
That's the unfortunate thing. A lot of people might say, well, you live in New York City. Of course, everything's expensive in New York City. Why do you live there? Where there's like probably 3 to 4 million people in New York City. So the dating pool is a lot bigger. So why would you want to leave that situation and go somewhere where the pool is a lot smaller? That's a tough dilemma. Mathematically, it makes sense to live in an area where the cost of living is cheaper. But as I mentioned, the pool, the amount of people you can take out on dates and things that you could do is going to decrease.
What's causing so much financial anxiety among single Americans? Singles tax is a newly coined term referring to the financial burdens that are uniquely incurred by single people.
I definitely think there is a singles tax. It's much more expensive to be single than to be in a relationship.
If you're single and living alone, you don't get the economies of scale. So instead of having a partner to split expenses with, you cover everything yourself.
Now, as a married man, I would agree. There is a single tax out there. I do feel like single people do get punished, and they get punished pretty harshly. For example, I am married and I have a kid. The advantage for me is I get the child tax care credit. But at the same time, you could make decisions. You could cut so much expenses on your own. But the problem is, how much of it can you cut?
The biggest expense among them is housing. A 2023 analysis by Zillow revealed that renters pay a singles tax of nearly $7,000 a year for living alone. And in major cities like New York City, that number can be as high as $19,500 a year.
My largest expense is actually my housing. So my rent takes up the majority of my expenses. It's definitely challenging finding an apartment and securing housing in New York City as a single person because one, the rent is so high, so you have to make a certain amount of money to even qualify for an apartment, on your own.
It is very difficult to apply for an apartment on your own. Sometimes it's difficult for even couples to apply. Many places want you to have 3 times more than the rent. That's a lot of money, and some people unfortunately don't have it. Now, of course, if there's 2 people applying, the likelihood of you being able to get that is higher than a single person. And that is one expense that you really can't cut. Rent is rent, no matter if you're single or you're not. Rent price is always going to be the same. That's one benefit that you could get as well, is if you're in a relationship, is the fact of you could split your rent in half.
The cost of living in New York City has definitely made me and my friends reconsider why we do live here and what we're actually investing in. Because if you don't have a lot of extra money to spend, if you're spending it all on your rent and your bills, and you can't really go out, or you can't really enjoy the arts and culture and activities that are all around New York City, why are you here?
That does suck. That probably puts a huge strain that you can see all these great things in the cities, all these things you can enjoy, and unfortunately you can't because you don't have the money for it. But as I mentioned, like in this guy in the video, if he finds someone to be in a relationship with and they decide to move to, let's say, New Jersey, right across the river, he might not want to go there. Now that he's able to get his expenses a lot cheaper by splitting it in half with someone, now he finally gets a chance to enjoy these amenities. So you see, it's strictly not only about money. It's a lot of things that come into play when you're in relationships and when you're not.
Inflation has also played a major role in aggravating these expenses.
It's really hard to control your housing expense, and it's really hard to control your food expense because they are necessities. Things like clothing, entertainment, they have more variability, but these fixed expenses really do contribute to that singles tax, and unfortunately that's where inflation is hitting the hardest right now.
See, inflation is really screwing everything up. I'm 42 years old. You see, back in my days, once you turned 18 and you lived on your own, a lot of my friends lived on their own and didn't have all these roommates. They did it by themselves. And it makes me think how they did it. Well, things were cheaper back then. Now it seems impossible for someone to live on their own. So single people are really struggling when it comes to that. And that's why the single tax burden is extremely difficult for most of them, because how are you able to live in these current times with everything being so high, all these layoffs, all this stress that's put on top of you? It's really tough being single. Not fully. I will explain in the end.
Financial advantages for married couples are written right into the laws of the land.
The most prominent example is the income tax. According to MIT's calculator, the typical tax expense for a single adult with no children is about 44% higher than the split expense from two working adults with no children.
Now, why is that the case? Why is someone that's single, might have a great job, they're doing everything, they're contributing to the economy, they're being punished 44% higher as the same? That doesn't quite make sense. And to me, that's why I feel like it's completely wrong. Okay, you're already living on your own. You're trying to find someone to be with. On top of that, you're being punished for it. Does not seem fair.
It used to be that tax brackets were structured in such a way that if two people were earning money and then they combined their incomes, they would actually pay more taxes after they were married.
This marriage tax penalty was largely eliminated for all but certain states and high-income earners, following the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act under the Trump administration.
There's really no longer a marriage penalty. The standard deduction is basically double the single deduction. The time that being married does benefit you financially is if you do have one spouse that earns more than the other. You have someone who's making $200,000 and your spouse is making $400,000. Now that does benefit you.
This income gap could result in bigger tax breaks that are reserved for couples with children.
Now, as you see, there's a lot of advantages of being married. There's a lot of tax advantages as well of being married and having kids. But this is the problem that I want to discuss. It's not only about money. There's a lot of things that come into play as well. It's also about the ability to do whatever it is that you want to do. Thinking things are better in the other side is something that would definitely get you in trouble. You ask some married couples and they say, oh, they wish they were single, they had all this freedom. You ask single people and they say they wish a relationship. No matter what side you're on, you always want to be on the other side of the spectrum. And that's where things get icky, because you cannot always believe that simply being in a relationship, everything is going to work out financially. That's not the truth. You now need to have two people aligned to make decisions, not just one. And it's really difficult to get someone to agree with exactly what you're saying. If you think this being married has all these advantages because you can split all these expenses, well, why is there such a high divorce rate when it comes to money in relationships? There's this chart that I saw that I found very interesting. It says, let me check it out. Women in the labor force. Now it says 65% of females and 85% of male that are single are participating in the labor force. Now you would think if you get married, the numbers will increase. That's not the case. 96.1% male in the workforce that are married, and 52.1% female. So the number actually dropped. So if you could work together and get this great future, then why is it that the percentage of women are dropping in the workforce? Probably we know why, because you have kids, but that's the reason why I say you cannot strictly just focus on the money. There's other circumstances that come along with being in a relationship that can change the dynamic. And if you think everything's gonna be great when you're in a relationship, it's not always. There's benefits and there's not. Let me read to you some of the comments that I saw in the video. If you think being single is expensive, wait until you get married and divorced. Really, come on, that's a choice of yours. You decided to get into a situation that didn't work out and you got divorced. Unfortunately, that happens at times. So you can't compare that to a single person. Stop it. The next comment is this. This is true. I feel like I'm penalized for being single and not having children. I should be rewarded. Yes, you should. I agree, but everything should be equal. You should not get punished for the simple fact of being single. It's strictly just not fair. Here's the next comment. I have no kids, but I tell my boss I have kids. When they know you're single with no dependents, they feel entitled to your time. Some bosses would expect you to do extra while another married coworker is enjoying their day off. You're also less likely to get fired or laid off. Unfortunately, that's true. A lot of bosses out there, a lot of companies out there will see single people as, you know, they are alone, they have nothing else to do, so they can stay and work. That's not fair. And some people use being married and kids to their advantage. They'll take sick days off, they'll do a whole bunch of things that they really don't need to do, all because they're married, and that's not fair. But unfortunately, that's something that a lot of people deal with, and I don't really understand, and I don't really know how that could be fixed. Do you know? And here's the last comment that I thought was really interesting that I never thought about. I'm married and provide for both my wife and I as she goes to school. I have a mortgage to pay and I'm self-employed in a struggling industry. Times are tough, but I'm hoping to survive. This is a sole provider. That's something I really never thought about. What do you think is harder? Being single by yourself, making all the decisions, whether it's good or bad, but you know it's 100% your fault, or raising a family, having people to support, and you are the only provider in the household. That's something that is really, really difficult. And unfortunately, to most situations, that is a choice. It's cheaper to stay home to take care of your kids. I get that. But that's the reason why I keep on saying being in a relationship has its own difficulties, and it's not always the best situation. People who are married struggle as well. I was giving a lot of love to single people, but married people out there struggle as well. There's a lot of difficulties they deal with, because when it comes to money, it's all about your personal preference, the things you buy, the things you decide to do. It's always easier for one person to decide not to buy something, but it's harder to convince someone else why you should buy something and why you shouldn't. I thought this video was really interesting, and as I said, single people, I feel you out there. Hold on. Hope you find someone to be with, the right person, and I hope you get to the point where you want to get to financially. In this current economy, does it continue to make you all money stressed? See you guys in the next video. Peace.